Okay, let's get started. So hello, friends, and welcome. We are going to talk today for probably about 35 minutes on AI use policies. We're also going to kind of touch on the general topic of AI safety in the workforce, which I think are obviously interconnected. And my hope is that after today, folks will leave with a pretty good understanding of what are the issues around the use of AI in the workforce, and what should they be doing today, especially from a legal compliance perspective as well as an HR perspective, to kind of move the ball forward with their organization or work for their clients. Quick introduction for me. My name is John Root. I'm the founder of a company called Proceptual. We do audit, compliance, insurance services for the emerging regulation of AI. And basically what that means is that clients come to us when they have read in the news that there's going to be a bunch of regulation around AI, both here in the United States where I'm based, in the European Union, where they have just released a 265-page draft of the EU AI Act, which is a real beast. Canada, Switzerland, Singapore, everyone's going to be doing regulations of AI. So people come to us to kind of figure out how do they actually comply through that tapestry. And we also provide trainings on AI safety, which we'll get to at the end. But if this is content that you like, that thinks it's useful, and you think it's useful in your organization, we're happy to come talk about it to your organization too. So here, let's start with what probably from an HR legal compliance perspective feels like the bad news, which is that your team right now, your employees are using generative AI platforms like ChatGPT, and they're using them whether you know about it, whether you like it or not. So in a recent poll from SHRM, more than half of frontline white collar workers are using some sort of generative AI at work. The power of those systems, first of all, if you haven't used ChatGPT, you absolutely should. And when I gave an HR presentation on AI a year ago, I found half the people raised their hands that they used AI. When I asked 6 months ago, 3/4 of people had used it. So if you have not kind of played with these platforms like ChatGPT, Google Gemini, which has really been in the news this week, or a bunch of the other ones, Facebook Llama, et cetera, you should block out an hour, one of your evenings, go play with the tools, see what they can do. It feels like magic to me at first. But AI systems are incredibly good now and are going to get better and better at producing written documents. They can produce spreadsheets. They can produce computer code. They can debug computer code. They can produce graphics, and increasingly they can produce video. We'll look at a couple examples of this as we go. So I always tell people these tools are becoming too valuable not to use. So this is a set of technologies where basically everyone on your team is going to be able to benefit from their use. So unless we kind of take proactive action to manage that use, we can expect that more and more of our employees will be using these technologies. And finally, the vast majority of organizations don't have an AI use policy in place. So part of the work that we do is we do exactly this, and we get calls like I got a call yesterday from a home healthcare organization in the Midwest, and they had a nurse on their staff who had to go write notes for her patients. And for her entire tenure, the notes had been, kind of one sort of grammar and one sort of kind of cadence. And then overnight, they became kind of this like English Victorian language that anyone who's seen a lot of ChatGPT outputs can recognize as ChatGPT. So they need to figure out what do they do for that? Is that a HIPAA violation? Spoiler alert, yes, that is a HIPAA violation. So those are the kinds of things that cause people to think about this issue. We talked a little bit about this already. So the common uses of AI in the workplace. Again, if you've used AI extensively, you probably know these things, but drafting emails, updating databases, creating computer code, both creating it from whole cloth, editing and debugging, sorting and ranking resumes in the HR world is a really big use of AI. It's also a highly regulated use of AI already. So we'll talk about that as we go. Any sort of brainstorm. I'm writing a book. I asked ChatGPT to brainstorm names for my book that also had the URL available, and it did an incredible job of that. So ChatGPT, thank you for naming my book project. And creating all sorts of graphics in this presentation. In fact, I've used ChatGPT to create all the graphics in this presentation except for my own face. So basically, any work function where you're asking people to generate an output is going to be extremely likely to be AI generated in the future. And as you think about how are people in your organization using AI now, when you ask especially younger career folks who are, number one, kind of creating the first draft of a lot of outputs in every organization, number two, are more more technology and AI forward than, those of us who are now 40, et cetera. Those are usually the folks that are using AI, where we have to kind of put some common sense guardrails around its use. One of the challenges, we're going to talk about a number of the challenges with AI in the workplace, is scams that are powered by AI. So fraud in the workplace is going to become much more targeted, much more personalized, and it's going to be much more scaled. And when I'm talking about fraud, I'm really talking about folks outside the organization that are getting inside your organization to cause trouble. So a couple examples: AI systems can quickly scrape information off the web. So you may have seen in your organization this like gift card scam. A number of my companies have dealt with this in the past, where someone gets a message, usually they're a junior employee, and it's from like the CEO or the CFO, and it says, "Oh, you need to go out and get a bunch of gift cards from Walgreens, usually for Apple gift cards or something like that. And I need you to then scratch off the codes and send them to me. And remember, I'm the CEO, I could fire you." Okay, that's like kind of like, like 5 years ago fraud. Most people can suss that out now. But what we're seeing is that AI systems can massively personalize this. So let's say that you get a note from someone in your organization. It's not so lazy to say it's the CEO trying to ask someone 5 levels down for a favor. Say, that's the example there. Like, "This is Susan from marketing. I hope you had a great vacation at Disney World." That makes it a lot more believable, doesn't it? If AI is able to go scrape someone's Facebook, scrape someone's Instagram, and just like pick out little things that make it more believable, that's going to make these sorts of scams both more prevalent and more successful, unless we're thoughtful about how to prevent them. Secondly, this new deep fake audio and video technology, which I'm going to show you in a second, is going to make, especially audio now and video soon, fairly indistinguishable from reality. And if you're following along here in the United States, we have a big election coming up, and people are talking about deep fakes a lot, right? Deep fakes of our candidates. People can make a candidate say something ridiculous. But this is going to be used for scams as well. So an example there, I just leaving you a voicemail to go with the email I just sent you. "Did you buy those gift cards yet?" Right. So now, you're a brand new employee. You've been at the company for 6 months. You get an email from the CEO saying, "Buy these gift cards." And then an hour later, you get a voicemail from someone who sounds like the CEO's voice, who you've heard in town halls, that said, "Did you get my gift cards yet?" That really makes it a different world. And there'll be lots of things like phishing scams, and we've all dealt with phishing. We probably have programs in place to prevent it, but it's going to get more automated and it's going to get more personalized. Two examples over there from the news recently. So there was, this was in, I believe, Singapore. A finance worker was convinced to send out a $25 million wire when the CFO asked them to do so in a Zoom call. And of course, the CFO on the Zoom call was a deep fake, right? So those are the things that we should be looking for. And those are kind of the impacts when these sorts of things happen. And the second headline there, voice cloning scams are on the rise. This technology is already here. And in fact, let's see it in action for a second. Let me play you this really short video. All right, I'll pause it there. So that's kind of what we think about when we think about a deep fake. Obviously, I gave my permission because I did this myself, but I used a program to do this. It's called heygen.com. There's probably a dozen of them now that do exactly this. This was free, right? So I don't need any technology. I don't need to code for this. This is a very easy platform. And I trained it with probably 5 or 6 minutes of me just sitting here in my office and talking. So if someone out in the audience was just like recording this, right? So Brian, Melissa, Becca, you're recording this. You could very well upload my image, my video and my audio to a deep fake generator and make me say basically anything. So as we think about how that works in the workplace, that's going to be pretty significant. Phishing, we mentioned, will be big. You've probably started to get already, if you're like me, a bunch of these kind of like random phishing spam messages. And we're all like pretty bright, pretty tech people on here probably. We're all bright, whether we're tech, maybe not. But thinking through, this is like obviously a scam for those of us that are used to looking for scams. But when this message comes and it's not some "how are you" from an unknown number, it's like, hey, this is, Susan from accounting. Sorry to have to text you on your personal line. I need you to do something for me. That's going to be a little bit more compelling. Okay, so let's move on from scams. Let's talk about some of the other issues that relate to challenges with AI in the workplace. So IP issues is going to be a really, really big one. It's unclear when someone in our organization uploads a bunch of stuff to ChatGPT. Um, First of all, what happens to the data that we upload? We're going to talk about that in a second, but it's also really unclear who owns those outputs, right? So if we're using a free system, we go on free ChatGPT, and we have an early level designer, and we ask them to create an image for a marketing campaign. They create the image, we show it to millions of people, and then one of our competitors calls and says, hey, wait a second, my entry level designer created something that is 99% the same, and we're using it first, right? Who owns those images? When we create something in-house, we assume that it's, well, we don't assume, we contract that it's work for hire from our people, and that we own that IP. But when ChatGPT makes it, do we or do we not own that IP? That's a really critical issue. Hallucinations is another issue. Hallucinations, if you've not heard the terminology, just refers to the possibility that AIs are just wrong. Like we ask them something and they say something and it's just completely not true, and then bad things happen. So this is the prototypical case. This was a couple months ago. A lawyer in New York used ChatGPT to make a brief for them. And for those lawyers on the call here, you research a bunch of old cases to find out what the precedents are. You cite the precedents in your briefs. ChatGPT just made up the precedents, right? So they just made up, the people of the state of Illinois versus Root or whatever. And obviously this lawyer got found out, which is good, and now faces all these sanctions and international embarrassment too. So that's an example of a hallucination, and something we have to be aware of. And we have to teach our people, right, to be aware of this. So not just we're aware of it, but we teach especially our more entry-level people, that when you use AI, what it creates is not always correct. The next big challenge with AI is around data security and data privacy. So when we upload information to AI, we're almost by definition bypassing the very carefully created data security and privacy policies that we have in our organizations. It's also usually very unclear who owns the data once we've uploaded it, right? So we would say that we do, but certain AI algorithms may use the information that users upload to train itself. Now, I want to talk with this more because ChatGPT in particular has done a pretty good job of creating like an enterprise level tier. So if you have if you have ChatGPT Enterprise, you've poured over the contracts with them, you understand the privacy in those contracts, and you've negotiated it with them, totally fine, right? So that's probably the top 5 to 10% of organizations that have done that. The other 95% of organizations are just using these tools without having those agreements in place. Particularly if your organization deals with personal identifiable information. And of course, in the HR context, we all do that for sure. But in particular, in regulated industries like healthcare, we talked about HIPAA a couple minutes ago. If you upload your patient notes to ChatGPT, that is a HIPAA violation. Finance, very regulated, and of course, insurance, incredibly regulated. So the idea that we would have a young person who've asked to do a very onerous report just uploads all the information to ChatGPT to get the first draft of the report, that's a real challenge for most organizations. And then last but not least is the issue of bias. And when I present usually to HR audiences, bias is the number one challenge that they have heard of. The challenge with AI is that the systems are trained on big amounts of data, huge amounts of data, right? And when there is that training data includes some kind of bias, oftentimes the bias that's inherent, unfortunately, in our society that we've been learning about over the last 5 years, it's very possible that that bias expresses itself in the AI outputs as well. Again, similar to the last slide, this is very important in HR, very important in regulated industries. And I always tell this prototypical example from Amazon. This was almost 10 years ago, so this is not breaking news, but Amazon had created an algorithm to look at all the applications it got for software engineers and to choose the best candidates, and raise them kind of to the next round of the interview process. At that time, the vast majority of Amazon software engineers were men, which of course is kind of endemic challenge in that profession, unfortunately. And so the resume started shooting out men. Okay, and of course, these are smart people. So they look at these output like, well, wait a second, algorithm. You can't just only send out men. Don't consider gender. So then the algorithm starts to do things like give extra points to people that played football and not the extra points to people that play field hockey, or it starts to give more points to people that went to the University of Michigan and less points to people that went to Sarah Lawrence College, right? So it starts to learn to route around those human given instructions. That's kind of where the challenge is with bias. That's why we hear about bias all the time. So again, Amazon took this off the market. We're not calling out Amazon in particular. This is just one of the kind of one of the sorts of challenges that we address when we think about bias and AI. Okay, now those are the challenges. We're going to move to the solutions in a second, but before I do that, I want to call out one of sort of the philosophical challenges that we're trying to overcome here, which is that AI isn't bad, and we're not, at least for me, like we shouldn't just ban it in our organization, right? An organization that's not using artificial intelligence is going to fall behind their competitors. Secondly, this isn't like a clear-cut situation. So I always compare AI regulation and AI compliance issues internally with something like sexual harassment, right? So sexual harassment is clearly very bad. And when we do our compliance obligations and our training for and our policies for sexual harassment, we're trying to define that behavior. That's the challenge, is defining it, and then make sure that we tell people not to do those things, right? There's gray in there, but like it's clear what we're trying to do. With AI, we're trying to do a different thing. We're trying to do a balancing act where we're balancing productivity, innovation, and making our workforce that much more effective against these challenges that we have just seen, right? And so I have this quote over on the right side. According to SHRM, 85% of employers who are using AI says it saves time or increases efficiency. So as we move into talking about our AI use policies, we're trying to find the right balance, right? We're not trying to define AI so we can ban it. We're trying to understand how is it used in our organization? How will it be used on an ongoing basis, right? Because these technologies are advancing very quickly. That's the challenge that we face. Okay. This is the 5-step process that we use for AI use policy creation. And we're going to jump into each of the steps. In fact, we'll just do that now, spend our time there. So the first step in my mind is identifying the process owner. And this is not just for the AI use policy. In my opinion, having worked with lots of clients on these issues, someone in the organization has to take some sort of overall responsibility for the implementation of the AI strategy. I don't think that AI is just a compliance issue. I don't think it's just an HR issue. I don't think it's just an IT issue. It's an organization. It's an issue that kind of transcends those barriers or those silos in the organization. So I think that someone should be appointed the AI champion in the organization. They have to be sufficiently senior to be able to make the organization do things to get the attention of senior executives. So I don't think it's the right thing to get someone right out of college, right out of grad school for this. I think of it as sort of similar to a chief of staff position. It doesn't need to be a C-level appointment. It doesn't necessarily need to be someone with 25 years of experience in the company, but it needs to be someone that has the ear and the eye of senior management that can get things done. It's also not good to make this kind of what I call a pile on top responsibility. I think we all know what that means, right? Like just another clunker hits your desk and you have to go deal with it. This has to be something that's resourced. And I think for organizations at the enterprise level or even at kind of the mid-market level, AI is so important to your organization, so important to the future of what you're doing, like regardless of what industry you're in, that it makes sense to invest here. So we identify the process owner in step one. Secondly, we create a registry of AI systems. And so the champion has to create this registry. And what we're trying to do is make sure we understand what is being used now in our organization. There's a couple different buckets. So one is foundational models. And what that means is like the very high level big AI models like ChatGPT, Meta Llama, like Google Gemini. Those, I guarantee you, those are in use. Secondly, especially for larger or more tech-focused organizations, AI algorithms that we're training and using internally. And third, and this is the one that people forget a lot, where AI is being integrated in our outside vendors. So if basically whatever vendor you have for anything, there's a good chance that they're putting AI functionality in that. So your HR information system, your CRM, both HubSpot and Salesforce, and probably everyone else has invested enormously in artificial intelligence. So it's important to know, and you can go down the list, right? Your ERP or whatever else, like whatever you're using, make sure you understand what AI is in the system. Then we have to make sure that the champion crosses functions and make sure that they understand how these systems are being used today, right? So it's kind of tempting to say, okay, we're going to talk to IT about AI. We can talk to marketing about AI, right? They're using it to create their emails today. We have to talk to sales about AI. They're using it to order their lists and to do initial outreach through either internal processes or external vendors like Apollo.io or the rest of them. And then the registry has to include information on which systems are going to start going under regulatory scrutiny, right? So the importance here is not just this list that we can then forget about, but it's to say, well, wait a second, we use AI in our hiring process right now. If we have employees in New York City Local Law 144 requires us to do a bias audit on those results. Do we have employees in the European Union, or do we sell in the European Union? The massive, and I think I've already waved it around, the massive 265-page EU AI Act, which will go into effect in about 2 years, will have very extensive regulations on that. So we're trying to create this registry as kind of a forward-looking process to understand how we're using these systems. Number 3 is to draft the policy. And I always say, I love my lawyer friends. I think I have some lawyer friends on this call. I think that legal has to be involved in any policy, but I don't believe that legal needs to drive the AI policy, right? I want to make sure that the champion in our organization is going department to department to make sure that we understand how we're using AI and how we're using it productively, and how we're in the next 1 to 2 years, we're going to keep using it and grow our use of AI. And that's not necessarily just a legal function, right? This is not sexual harassment. We're not just trying to ban it, right? It's a little bit more nuanced. We want to make sure that the systems that we listed in our registry, we're taking opinion on each of those. So is it encouraged that we use them? And that's especially when they're preferred vendors, when they're vetted vendors. So for example, the AI that's embedded in Salesforce, if we're a Salesforce company, we're probably going to use it, right? So we need to make sure we understand that. Secondly, systems that are acceptable for certain uses and not others. So we might say that you can use ChatGPT to draft an email in the marketing department, but if you are in the finance department, you may not upload all of our corporate finances to do the monthly book close into ChatGPT. And then, of course, third is algorithms that are not acceptable. What I've seen a lot of organizations do on sort of like those top level foundational models is to say, we're going to be a ChatGPT company, or we're going to be a Microsoft AI company, which those are kind of related, or we're going to be a Google AI company, and we are going to go to the enterprise level with those. We're going to make sure that we understand the agreements that we have that safeguard our IP, that safeguard our data privacy, and then we're going to ban the other foundational models, right? So we're picking one, investing our time and resources in it, and then not using the others. Third, I think incident reporting is really important. We want to create an environment where people that make mistakes, which is totally inevitable, feel that they should not just sweep those under the rug. So if we have something that happens with AI and we expose some personal data, we need to create a culture where it's okay to make that mistake. We just have to report it, right? So that can kind of go up the ladder, and then we can take care of it. And then I also think just general guidelines are really important. And usually the general guidelines that our clients end up with are things like, if there's a new system that you want to use, here's how you get it into the registry, as opposed to if there's a new thing, they just use it and don't say anything, right? So it's kind of, again, this give and take where we want people to use these innovative new products and platforms. We have to just put some guidelines around its use case. Okay, number 4, this is really important. We have to conduct training on this issue. This is not, AI use policy is not something where you can just like slip it into the employee handbook and be like, hey, we have updated the employee handbook again, and there's 19 new things in it, and one of them is AI, and then no one ever reads it, right? Like, this is not corporate boilerplate stuff. This is really important for how we run our business. So at minimum, to me, all white collar workers, and especially like our early career people, but it's all of them really, need to be exposed to AI safety training. So we have our policy in place. We need to make sure that we're communicating that policy to everyone who might be using it. I think that training works really well when it's part of sort of a broader discussion or broader training. When we do AI safety training for our clients, we'll put, here's the policy in there. We want people to understand the policy, but we kind of want people to understand AI as well, right? Like make it a little bit fun, make it a little bit interesting, make it a little bit engaging. And then this last one, I always, when we think about training, I think it's always tempting to be like, well, here's the policy, here's what policy means, and that's it. But we really want to give people kind of the common sense to think through issues that they might have with AI, which are not all going to be covered in even the very best policy. So example there, like, what if you think you get a message from your boss, you think it's a deep fake, like the one that I showed you 30 minutes ago? What do you do with that? How do you report that? Those are important questions as we do our training. Here's a kind of an agenda for the way that we do training. Again, in all disclosure, we'd love to come do this with your organization. But just I won't go through all the words here, but we've got, depending on kind of the context and the level of the organization, like a 30 to 90-minute AI training where we go over how to stay safe with AI, how to use AI productively, try to explain what AI is. I mean, a lot of people don't use this technology, and so we want to make sure that when people are getting their first introduction to the world of AI, it's not like, oh, there's a deep fake of Joe Biden telling me to buy a gift card in my mailbox, right? That's not how we want people to first interact with this technology. And then finally, we want to support ongoing iteration of the policy, right? So AI policies can't just sit around. It's not a thing that you do once and then forget about it. The champion has to make sure that we're updating this policy as we go. So the most important thing is this maintenance, where we have to put new AI algorithms that our organization are using into our registry, and we have to make decisions on them, right? So if someone comes to you and says, hey, we have this, there's this new technology from this vendor, we really want to use it. Someone has to be able to relatively quickly make a decision as to whether or not that use case is acceptable based on data privacy, compliance, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an ongoing thing, and that's part of what the champion is going to be doing on a daily basis. We want to make sure that we're observing employee use patterns, understanding how they use AI, and then updating our policies. And then making sure that we're aware of new safety and technology concerns, and making sure we're keeping track of new regulation, right? So again, you can't just be set it and forget it. It's a living blueprint for how this technology is going to be used in our organization. Okay, that is our use policy presentation. Just a quick little discussion about Proceptual and what we do. So we do three things. First of all, compliance, audit, and assurance for regulation of AI. So if you are the person in your organization who is responsible for the 265-page EU AI Act, you're going to be responsible for the 10 relatively large and detailed and technical reports that will be required for organizations to comply. That's the work that we do. We come and make that efficient and easy and take it off people's plate. Secondly, we do this training professionally. So if your organization needs to know more about this issue, about safety issues, we do that. And we also do some fractional AI governance consulting. So helping people set policies around their use of AI in the workplace. Have a number of big clients, basically every industry. We spoke at SHRM. We'll move past this. We work with a lot of folks. And here's my contact information. If you've got a question, feel free to put it in the chat here. I don't see anything now, so we'll probably wrap up if I don't see anything pop up in the next 30 seconds or so. I'd love to talk to you and your organization about this. If you are using AI, but you do not have a use policy, and again, you are using AI, like whether you know it or not, we'd love to have a conversation with you about this technology. So feel free to contact me. Again, we'll send out the recording. Feel free to distribute in your organization. Don't see any questions, so I think we'll wrap up. And as I say, I'll return the next 5 to 10 minutes to you. Thanks everybody for joining. It was great to give this presentation. I'm really passionate about this topic, so it's really fun. And we will be in touch. Thanks.